The next one is it's a split squat with a stick. I always just called it a Gandalf split squat because it's... Have you ever been told that allowing your knees to go over your toes is bad for your knees? Yet you ask yourself the question, if that's the case, how do I walk down a flight of stairs? How do I jump? How do I land? And how do I do other things like change of direction and cutting? Having flexible ankles lowers your chance of injury, it increases your squat range of motion, and it allows you the opportunity to build up resilience in your knees by increasing the exposure to it slowly over time. In today's video, we're going to go through a test on how you can test your ankle range of motion. We're then going to go through a couple of stretches and some strength exercises that'll help increase your ability to get deeper into a squat and build up your resilience in the knees. So the test that we use when we're testing ankle range of motion is a knee-to-wall test. And this is where we would start relatively close to the wall, and then we would just move our feet away, trying to measure the distance before that heel kind of comes up. And we would take note of where that is, and then we would go and do our interventions, be it the stretches that you'll see later or be it the strength exercises. And the goal with this is that eventually when you unlock the ability to say squat to depth, that maintains the mobility and you don't have to do these exercises too often, unless you're looking for a little bit more or unless you're just feeling particularly tight. Now, the exercise or this test has benefits and it has downsides, just like everything does. So the benefit is if you do the test the same way each time, even if it's slightly wrong, you'll get a better reading and you can actually use that more accurately over time. The downside is where people can kind of say like cheat and they change their position of their toes or they change the position of their foot and they're either all the way on the outside of their foot trying to buy themselves range of motion. And this can be, it can give a false reading, but it can also just mean that you're ticking a box for sake of ticking a box. So what we would want to do is, suggestion one would be to do it barefoot or in socks. The cue that I like to use, which is from a book from Quinn Henoch, is like trying to kind of spread your toes. We don't want to just like curl them up and really crunch down. We want to be in a position where from here, I like lift my toes up, I spread them out and I put them down flat. And I want to feel the whole foot, the big toe, the little toe, the heel, even, so not more one or not more the other. And then I just want to allow my knee to go forward. Cool? If that feels fine, I would slide back a little bit. That feels fine. And then eventually I'm looking for a point where, that was not too bad. I reckon this will be my limit here, about there. And then I would measure that. And you could put tape on the floor, you could just measure it with a tape measure. And then I would go and do my interventions. So now that we get into the stretch category, we have two exercises that we typically prescribe to people. The first one we use is a banded ankle stretch, which is where we tie a very thin band, we double it up, we put it around the front of the ankle, and we sit and we hold it for about 45 to 60 seconds on each side. Now I use a relatively thin band, and what I've done is, because when they're thin, if you just go through once, like if I go through just like this, it doesn't really provide a lot of tension. So we end up doubling it up. And I want it right on that ankle joint. And I put as much of my weight on that front leg as possible. And this is where having this elevated makes it a little bit beneficial because I can kind of use my body weight, I can organize my pelvis in a way that means it starts to look very similar to that of a squat. The second stretch that we use is almost the test that we were talking about before. This is where the test kind of becomes a stretch in its own right. And this is where we would pulse in and out. And I really try to organize my body in a way that's aligned. You'll see some people in different positions and we pulse, we feel a stretch, and then we come back out. And I'm looking to get to a point of where I can keep my feet balanced. I'm not quite at the wall, but I'm getting close. And the last thing, what I don't want to do is, I don't want to shift my weight just to get it to touch the wall so that everything kind of comes in too much. I like to keep everything nice and straight and in line. And I'm just going to pulse in and out. The big tip for both of these is that you want to spend a good amount of time on them, but you don't want to spend too much time on them. So I would like 5 minutes in total included in a warm-up is probably all you need to do. And once you've unlocked it, once you've got the capabilities, you've got the ankles, the actual other exercises make a big difference. So you don't have to do them all the time. I can sometimes see people just doing them continually. If you're still doing the same stretch month after month after month and you're not seeing an improvement, there's probably better uses of our time in the gym. All right, so now that we get into the strength section, one of the most common exercises that we start people with in our gym is a heel elevated squat. We generally do it with weight in front of us. Now, this does increase range of motion to a certain extent, but the main thing that I like about this is that it's slowly exposing us to allowing our knees to go forward, and it's doing it in a really controlled manner. So although it's not a direct increase in ankle range of motion, it's also just teaching us how to organize our body. And sometimes, for some people, the ankles are fine. It's learning to organize the body that makes the biggest difference to having a comfortable ankle range of motion and a squat. So a bonus point with the goblet squat is how you position your skeleton. Now, we know that by elevating the heels, it becomes easier and easier to squat. But if I'm on the floor and I'm in a really, really hyperextended position, no matter how good my ankle range of motion is, I'm gonna hit a bit of a roadblock because my skeleton's in too much of an extension. So that's why we use a plate in front of us. It's to teach us to be able to shift our weight back just a little bit to allow ourselves to sit into a more comfortable squat. So the bonus tip is that when you're getting organized here, use the plate to your advantage. It's not so much the weight itself, it's the weight being away from you that allows you to be able to sit into a certain position. So from here, a weight in front of us helps with this, and we're just gonna squat all the way down and then all the way back up. The tip that I would give for this is that it's probably too deep or it's too heavy if when you go to stand up, we shift too much. It wants to be very, very controlled for us. And then over time, I can slowly walk my way down the board till eventually being flat on the ground and having the ability for my knees to go forward to get into that deeper squat. The next one is it's a split squat with a stick. I always just called it a Gandalf split squat because it's and this is where we would start. I'm going to use this side because my right side's a bit wonky at the moment, so this will be beneficial for it. We would already start in that forward knee position, and we're going to squat down and then squat back up. Most of my weight's going to be on that front leg. The back leg is just going to be for balance. And I want to go to a point. The heel has to remain flat, and then I'd stand back up. And I would do this for 6 to 8 reps. I'd make it quite challenging, but I can feel a good stretch in the back of my calf, and I can feel obviously that hip flexor doing a lot of work too. I'd swap sides, push the knee forward, go down and then up. Go down and then up for us. Cool. The big thing that we don't want to see when we're doing the split squat is we don't want to see that heel lift up. So if I'm squatting down in this correct position and I get down and the heel comes back up, we don't want to see that. We want to see evenly distributed weight across the foot as I'm going down and up. So I can feel my heel, my big toe and my little toe all the same at the same time. I remember the first time I did an overhead squat, I couldn't actually keep my heels on the ground. Really uncomfortable, and it was really disheartening. By trying these exercises and by using the test as a good gauge, you'll find it gets easier and easier to kind of track your progress. This leads into another video that is super beneficial, which is 9 tips for beginner strength athletes, which you can find right here.